15,000 Romans, 30,000 naked barbarians, 20 minutes of slaughter. July 18th, 390 BC, the day Rome learned what fear tasted like. At the Alia River, Roman soldiers watched the Gauls approach, watched them strip naked, watched them paint their bodies blue and scream at the sky. The Romans laughed, called them savages. 20 minutes later, the Tiber River ran red. 15,000 soldiers ran for their lives, throwing away weapons, armor, dignity. Some drowned, some were butchered, some made it home. Rome was already lost. This wasn't just a military defeat. It was a psychological apocalypse. The moment Rome discovered they weren't invincible, weren't protected by gods. They were just men. And men die screaming when barbarians catch them. 7 months of occupation, 7 months of fire. One barbarian named Brennus, 2 words that would haunt Rome for 800 years. Vae Victis, woe to the vanquished. Quintus Fabius Ambustus was 34 years old, born into the Fabian family, one of Rome's most powerful patrician houses. Educated, cultured, trained in Greek philosophy and Roman law, the perfect diplomat. In the spring of 391 BC, he was sent with his 2 brothers to Clusium, an Etruscan city 140 kilometers north of Rome. The Clusians had a problem. A Gallic tribe called the Senones had laid siege to their city. The Senones, Celtic warriors from beyond the Alps. They'd migrated into northern Italy, looking for better land, warmer weather, and opportunities for what they called adventure, what everyone else called raiding. Their leader was named Brennus, not a name, a title. It meant king or chieftain in the Celtic language. We don't know his real name. History just remembers him as Brennus, the destroyer of Rome. But in 391, he was just another barbarian threatening an Etruscan city. Rome's Senate sent the Fabius brothers to negotiate. The mission was simple. Tell the Gauls to leave. Offer them money. Offer them better land. Just make them go away without Rome having to mobilize an army. Quintus Fabius arrived in Clusium with his brothers, met with Brennus, began negotiations. It went badly. Brennus was massive. Ancient sources describe him as towering over other men. Long red hair, a beard braided with gold wire, a golden torque around his neck that weighed maybe 3 kilograms. Arms covered in tattoos, spirals, and animals and symbols that meant nothing to Romans. He spoke through an interpreter. His demands were simple. Clusium had land. The Senones wanted it. Either negotiate a settlement or fight. Quintus, representing Rome, tried diplomacy, appealed to justice, to law, to the concept of recognized borders. Brennus laughed. "We carry our borders on our swords," he said. The negotiations collapsed. What happened next changed history. According to Roman law and international custom that even barbarians understood, ambassadors were sacred, untouchable. Their persons were inviolate. To harm an ambassador meant war with their nation. To side with one party in a conflict meant forfeiting neutral status. Quintus Fabius knew this. His brothers knew this. Every Roman knew this. They did it anyway. When Brennus's Senones attacked Clusium, when Gallic warriors charged the walls, when the battle began, the Fabius brothers picked up weapons and joined the defenders. Worse, Quintus personally killed a Gallic chieftain, rode him down on horseback, speared him through the back, then stripped the golden torque from his neck as a trophy. The Gauls went silent. In Celtic culture, the torque wasn't jewelry. It was a sacred object, a symbol of nobility and honor. To take it from a fallen chief was to desecrate his spirit, and a Roman ambassador had just done it. Brennus sent a formal complaint to Rome, demanded the Fabius brothers be handed over for punishment. The Senate debated. Some argued for compliance. Maintaining diplomatic protocol was essential, but the Fabius family was powerful. They had allies. They had influence. When the next elections came, Quintus Fabius and his brothers were elected as military tribunes. Not punished, promoted. Rome had just told the Gauls, "We don't respect your laws. We don't respect your dead. We don't respect you." Brennus called his warriors together, held a council. The decision was unanimous. Rome would burn. The Senones broke camp and marched south. 30,000 warriors. Maybe more. Ancient sources vary. But they all agree on one thing. The army was terrifying. Livy describes the advance. The whole country was swarming with the enemy. Not marching, not organized. Swarming. Like a natural disaster. Like locusts. The Gauls moved fast. Faster than any Roman army could march. They didn't have supply trains, didn't have baggage. Each warrior carried his own food. Dried meat, hard cheese, beer and leather skins. They traveled light. They traveled fast. They traveled angry. Towns and villages in their path panicked. Walls were fortified. Gates were barred. Fields were abandoned. Livestock was driven inside the walls. But the Gauls didn't stop, didn't raid, didn't pillage. They bypassed everything, shouted one thing as they passed. "Roma! Roma! Roma!" The psychological impact was devastating. Imagine being a farmer in rural Italy. You see an army of 30,000 barbarians approaching. You prepare for the worst. They ignore you. March past. Keep going. Toward Rome. You're not the target. You're irrelevant. Rome is the target. And that's more terrifying than being attacked, because it means they're focused. They're determined. They're not raiders. They're an invasion force with a specific goal. Rome. News reached Rome on July 10th, 390 BC. A massive Gallic army was 8 days away, moving fast, ignoring everything else, coming straight for the city. The Senate convened. Emergency session. The debate was brief. Senator Marcus Cornelius. We should negotiate. Send new ambassadors. Offer reparations for the Fabius incident. Senator Gaius Sulpicius. Reparations? For barbarians? Have you lost your mind? These aren't ordinary barbarians. They've unified multiple tribes. They're savages. Half of them fight naked. Naked? You want Rome to pay tribute to men who don't understand the concept of clothing? Laughter. Actual laughter in the Senate. The decision was made quickly. Raise an army. Meet the Gauls in the field. Crush them. Send a message to every barbarian in Italy that Rome was not to be trifled with. The problem was time. A proper Roman levy took weeks. Training, organization, proper equipment distribution. They had 8 days. The army that marched out of Rome on July 15th was a militia. Citizens called to arms. Some were veterans. Many weren't. Some had proper armor, bronze cuirasses, helmets, shields. Many didn't. Just a spear and whatever protection they could afford. 15,000 men, led by 6 military tribunes, including Quintus Sulpicius Longus. Professional soldiers? Maybe 3,000. Trained militia? Maybe 5,000. Everyone else? Farmers and shopkeepers who'd held a spear maybe twice in their lives? They marched out of Rome confident, singing, eager. They had no idea. The armies met 11 miles north of Rome, at a place where the Alia River flowed into the Tiber. The date was July 18th, a date that would live in Roman memory as a day of mourning. Dies Ater, Black Day. The Roman army arrived first, set up a defensive position. The military tribunes argued about formation, about tactics, about who should command which wing. While they argued, the Gauls appeared, 30,000 warriors, flowing out of the forest like a flood. And the Romans finally understood what they were facing. These weren't soldiers, not in the Roman sense. Some wore armor, bronze breastplates, chainmail shirts, helmets decorated with horns and animal heads. These were the noble warriors, the chiefs. Others wore simple tunics and trousers, what Romans called braccae, barbarian pants. Others wore nothing at all, completely naked, bodies painted blue and white, hair spiked with lime, screaming at the sky. Marcus Valerius was 28 years old, a Roman legionary. He'd fought the Etruscans twice, won both times. He'd been confident marching out of Rome. Now, watching 30,000 screaming barbarians approach, he felt his bladder release, warm urine running down his leg. Shame and terror in equal measure. He wasn't alone. Up and down the Roman line, men were vomiting, shaking. Some were crying. These were civilians, shopkeepers, farmers, not warriors. And across from them were men who'd been training for war since they could walk. Men who believed dying in battle was the highest honor. Men who fought naked to prove they weren't afraid of death. The Gauls began their war chant, a deep, rhythmic sound. Thousands of voices in unison. Not words, just sound. Animal, primal. Then they charged. The Gallic charge wasn't organized, wasn't tactical. It was pure violence. The naked warriors, the Gasata, they called themselves, led the assault, running full speed, screaming. No formation, no strategy, just fury. Roman military doctrine was based on discipline, on maintaining formation, on presenting a solid wall of shields and spears. But doctrine assumed your soldiers wouldn't break. The Roman line broke before contact. The reserve troops on the left wing, mostly inexperienced militia, saw the charge coming, saw naked painted men running at them with swords raised, saw their own death approaching. They ran, not a retreat, a rout. Panic, absolute uncontrollable panic. They threw down their weapons, their shields, their armor, anything that slowed them down, and they ran for the Tiber River. The Gauls caught them at the riverbank. Marcus Valerius was running, lungs burning, legs pumping. He could hear the Gauls behind him, hear their war cries, getting closer. He reached the Tiber. The water was flowing fast, deep, dangerous. He jumped anyway. The impact drove the air from his lungs. The current grabbed him, pulled him under. His armor, 15 kilograms of bronze, became an anchor. He kicked, fought, broke the surface, gasped. Something grabbed his ankle. Not the current, a hand. Another Roman, drowning, panicking, pulling Marcus down with him. Let go. The man didn't let go. Couldn't. Panic had erased his reason. All he knew was that he was drowning and someone else was there, and maybe if he pulled hard enough, he could breathe. They both went under. Marcus felt his lungs start to burn, felt the need to breathe become overwhelming, felt his vision start to dim. He did the only thing he could, drew his pugio, his dagger, and stabbed the drowning man. Once, twice, 3 times, the grip loosened. Marcus kicked to the surface, gasped, lived. Behind him, the drowning Romans sank into the Tiber, one of 3,000 who would drown that day. Romans drowned by their own armor while fleeing their own cowardice. On the riverbank, the Gauls were butchering stragglers. The Senones had a tradition. After battle, they took heads, not as trophies, as religious offerings. The head contained the soul. Collecting enemy heads meant collecting enemy spirits, power, victory. Roman soldiers who fell on the riverbank didn't just die, they were decapitated, their heads taken, their bodies left for crows. Historical accounts are clinical. The Romans were defeated at Alia. Heavy casualties were sustained. They don't describe the sounds, the screaming, the begging, the wet thunk of an iron sword separating head from body. They don't describe Marcus floating downstream, listening to his brothers die, and hating himself for being alive. The Battle of Allia lasted 20 minutes, maybe less. Of the 15,000 Romans who marched out that morning, 3,000 drowned in the Tiber. 4,000 were killed on the field. 2,000 were captured. Most would be enslaved or sacrificed. 6,000 escaped. Some made it back to Rome. Others fled to nearby allied cities. Some just disappeared into the wilderness, too ashamed to return. Marcus made it to Vae, an Etruscan city 15 kilometers from Rome. He was one of 400 Romans who sought refuge there. His armor was gone, lost in the river. His weapons were gone. His dignity was gone. All he had left was his life, and the memory of the man he'd killed to keep it. That night, Lying on the floor of a stranger's home, he heard the screams again, in his head. Not the Gauls' war cries, the screams of the man he'd stabbed, the Roman he'd murdered to survive. Marcus would hear those screams for the rest of his life. But at least he had a life. Back at Alia, on the riverbank, Roman bodies were rotting in the summer heat, headless, forgotten. And Brennus? Brennus didn't pursue the fleeing Romans. Didn't need to. He stood on the battlefield, surrounded by heads, and looked south. At Rome, the city was 11 miles away, undefended. The entire Roman army had just been destroyed in 20 minutes. Rome was his. He gave his warriors one night to celebrate, to drink, to boast, to collect their trophies. Tomorrow, they would march on the eternal city. And Rome? Rome was about to learn what happened to the vanquished. July 19th, 390 BC, the day after Alia. News of the defeat reached Rome at dawn. The survivors who'd made it back brought stories, horror stories, exaggerated by panic, but rooted in truth. The Gauls are coming. They're 11 miles away. The army is destroyed. There's nothing stopping them. Panic spread through Rome like fire. The Senate convened. Emergency session. But most of the military tribunes were dead or fled. The consuls were at Veii with the survivors. Leadership was absent. The decision was made by default. Evacuate. Not everyone. Rome couldn't evacuate 40,000 people. Not in one day. So they made a choice. A brutal, pragmatic choice. The young men of military age, anyone who could hold a weapon, were ordered to the Capitoline hill, the fortress, the highest point in Rome. If they could hold that, they could hold Rome, maybe 1,000 men, plus the Vestal virgins, the priestesses of Rome's sacred flame, who had to protect the religious artifacts. Everyone else, find refuge where you can. Flee to allied cities, hide in the countryside, but leave Rome. The Gauls are coming. The elderly, the women, the children, they were abandoned. Not because Romans didn't care, because there was no choice, no time, no resources, no hope. Senator Gaius Manlius was 71 years old. He'd served Rome for 50 years. He'd fought in 6 wars. He'd seen Rome grow from a regional power to the dominant force in Latium. Now he stood in his home, listening to his daughter beg him to flee. "Father, please, come with us, to Veii, to anywhere." "I'm too old to run, child." "Then you'll die here. Then I'll die in Rome." She left, took her children, joined the thousands streaming out of the city gates. Gaius sat in his courtyard, wearing his senatorial toga, sitting in his chair, waiting for death, for the Gauls, for the end. July 20th, 390 BC, 3 days after Alia, Brennus's army reached Rome. They approached cautiously. This was a trap. Had to be. Rome couldn't be this empty, this undefended. The gates stood open. No guards, no defenders, no resistance. Brennus sent scouts. They returned with the same report. The city is abandoned. So Brennus walked through the gates of Rome. No battle, no siege, no resistance. He just walked in. The Senones spread through the city, searching houses, looking for loot, for food, for Romans. They found Senator Gaius Manlius, sitting in his courtyard, wearing his toga, absolutely still, like a statue. The Gallic warriors approached carefully, touched him, verified he was alive. Just sitting there, calm, serene, waiting. One warrior, we don't know his name, was fascinated. He'd never seen a Roman up close. Reached out, touched Gaius's beard, long and white and dignified. Gaius's hand moved, fast, struck the Gaul across the face with his ivory staff. The warrior stepped back, stunned, then enraged. He drew his sword. The blow took Gaius's head off in one stroke. The old senator's body stayed upright for a second, then toppled. The massacre began. The Gauls found others. Elderly senators who'd chosen to stay, priests who'd remained at their temples, citizens who'd had nowhere to go. The killing wasn't systematic, wasn't organized. It was individual, personal. Each Gaul decided for himself what to do with the Romans they found. Some were killed quickly, decapitated like Gaius, heads added to the collection. Others were enslaved, bound, taken north to be sold or traded. Some were tortured, not for information. The Gauls didn't care about information, for sport, for entertainment, because they could. Ancient sources don't detail this much. They say many elderly citizens perished. The city was plundered. Clinical language, historian language. But archaeology tells a different story. Excavations in Rome have found layers of ash and bone dating to this period. Buildings burned with people inside. Bodies buried in mass graves, showing evidence of violence, traumatic injuries, decapitation, dismemberment. The sack of Rome wasn't a battle. It was a slaughter. For 3 days, the Gauls had free reign in a defenseless city. They looted temples, the gold offerings to Jupiter, the silver dedications to Mars, the bronze shields dedicated by victorious generals. They burned buildings, sometimes deliberately, sometimes accidentally. Drunk warriors knocking over lamps. They defiled sacred spaces. The Temple of Vesta, where the sacred flame had burned for centuries, was ransacked. The flame was extinguished. In Roman belief, that meant Rome itself had died. And up on the Capitoline hill, 1,000 Romans watched their city burn and could do nothing but hold the walls and pray. The Capitoline hill was Rome's highest point. Steep cliffs on most sides. Only one practical approach, easily defended by even a small force. It was Rome's last hope. Marcus Manlius Capitolinus commanded the defenders, 38 years old, experienced officer, former consul. He'd prepared for siege. The Capitoline had stored grain, water cisterns, weapons, everything needed to hold out for months. But months required discipline, required hope, required belief that relief was coming. Marcus looked at his men. 1,000 defenders. Maybe half were trained soldiers. The rest were young men who'd never held a spear before last week. And outside, at the base of the hill, 30,000 Gauls were making camp. The siege began. The first 3 weeks were a stalemate. The Gauls tried direct assaults. They failed. The cliffs were too steep. The defenders too entrenched. Brennus tried negotiation, sent envoys, offered terms, surrender the hill, pay tribute. Rome could survive. Marcus Manlius's response was a javelin, thrown at the envoy's feet. Message received. So the Gauls settled in, waited. Time was on their side. Eventually, the Romans would run out of food, or water, or hope. But Brennus was impatient. On the night of August 12th, 3 weeks into the siege, he ordered a night assault. The plan was simple. Scale the cliffs on the quietest side, the north face, where the rock was steepest but the guards were fewest. 300 Gallic warriors, moving in silence. No armor, it made noise. Just knives and swords, climbing in the darkness. They made it to the top, over the wall, into the fortress. Silent, perfect. The guards were asleep. The assault team formed up, ready to open the gates, ready to let the army in. Then the geese started screaming. The geese of Juno, sacred birds, kept in the temple on the Capitoline. In Roman religion, they were holy, untouchable, and hungry. The siege had been hard. Food was running low. The geese hadn't been fed properly in days. When the Gallic warriors crept past the temple, the geese smelled them. Foreign, threatening, wrong. They screamed, honked, made a sound like the apocalypse. Marcus Manlius Capitolinus was sleeping in quarters near the temple. The sound woke him instantly. He grabbed his sword, his shield, ran outside, saw Gallic warriors. In the fortress, on the wall, alarm, to arms. The garrison woke. Chaos, confusion. But training took over. Romans grabbed weapons, formed up, charged. The battle was desperate. Close quarters, darkness. Couldn't tell friend from enemy. Marcus found himself face to face with a Gallic warrior. Big man, maybe 190 centimeters, covered in scars. A warrior who'd survived 100 battles. The Gaul swung. Marcus blocked, countered. The gladius found flesh. The Gaul fell. Marcus didn't wait. Ran to the wall. Found Gauls climbing up. Still coming. He grabbed a shield from a dead defender. Held it in both hands. Used it like a battering ram. Ran at the first Gaul over the wall. The impact threw the warrior backward. Off the wall. 30-meter drop. The scream lasted 3 seconds. All along the wall, Romans were doing the same. Throwing Gauls off, breaking their lines, destroying their assault. By dawn, the night attack was over. 60 Gallic bodies at the base of the cliff. The rest had retreated. And in the temple of Juno, the geese settled back to sleep. Heroes, saviors. Marcus ordered extra rations for the sacred birds. They'd earned it. The legend of the geese would live forever. When Rome finally built its empire, when it conquered the world, it would remember. Sometimes, salvation comes from unexpected places, even from birds. The siege dragged on. August became September. September became October. The Gauls were suffering too. Roman summer was hot. Disease spread through their camp. Dysentery, malaria, ancient killers. Warriors who'd survived Alia were dying from infected water, from parasites, from the simple reality that 30,000 men living in close quarters without proper sanitation was a recipe for disaster. Brennus needed to end this. The gold was in the Capitoline. The remaining Romans were in the Capitoline. He could starve them out, but how long would that take? And how many more of his warriors would die of disease while he waited? He sent new envoys. New terms, simple terms. Pay 1,000 pounds of gold. The Gauls would leave Rome. Everyone would live. Marcus Manlius consulted with the surviving senators on the Capitoline. The treasury was there. The gold was there. The debate was bitter. Paying ransom to barbarians was humiliating, shameful, a violation of Roman pride. But the alternative was death. Slow starvation on the Capitoline, while the city below remained a Gallic camp. They agreed. 1,000 pounds of gold. A fortune. But Rome would survive. The gold was brought down, weighed using a Roman scale. The process took hours. Both sides watching. Suspicious. Hostile. The gold was measured. Short. By maybe 100 pounds. Brennus called for his own scales. They produced different weights. An argument erupted. Romans claiming Gallic scales were rigged. Gauls claiming Roman gold was impure. Quintus Sulpicius, one of the surviving military tribunes, protested. "These weights are fraudulent. You're cheating us." Brennus looked at him, drew his sword, heavy iron, long, sharp, threw it onto the scale. On the Gallic side, adding its weight to the measurements. "Vae Victis," he said. "Woe to the vanquished." The meaning was clear. We won. You lost. You pay what we say you pay. Might makes right. The sword determines truth. Rome paid the extra gold. Roman legends say this is when Marcus Furius Camillus arrived. Camillus, exiled general, former dictator, Rome's greatest warrior. In the legend, he arrives with an army, interrupts the ransom, declares the payment invalid, challenges Brennus. "Non oro, sed ferro, recuperanda est patria." Not with gold, but with iron, shall our fatherland be recovered. Then he attacks, drives the weakened Gauls from Rome, pursues them, destroys them on the road north, returns the gold, saves Rome. It's a beautiful story. Perfect, heroic, exactly the kind of ending Rome deserved. It probably didn't happen. Greek historian Polybius, writing closer to the events, makes no mention of Camillus at this point. In his version, the Gauls took their gold and left. Mission accomplished. Modern historians agree. The ransom was paid. The Gauls left voluntarily. Disease and reports of trouble back home convinced them to take their winnings and go. Camillus probably did return later, probably did help organize reconstruction, probably was declared a hero. But the dramatic rescue, the battle in Rome's streets, the recovered gold, Roman propaganda, myth-making, an attempt to salvage pride from humiliation. The truth was simpler and more brutal. Rome bought its survival, paid barbarians to leave. The gold was never recovered. Victory belonged to Brennus. By November 390 BC, the Gauls were gone. 7 months of occupation, 7 months of fear. Rome was ruined. Half the buildings burned, the temples looted, the population decimated. The survivors emerged from hiding, from Veii, from neighboring cities. They returned to find a city of ghosts. Marcus Valerius, the soldier who'd survived Alia by drowning a fellow Roman, walked through Rome's streets. Nothing looked familiar. The buildings he'd known were ash. The temples were ruins. The Senate house was a blackened shell. He found his home, or where it had been. Nothing remained but foundations. His family had fled to Carrhae. They'd survived. He'd find them eventually. But for now, he stood in the ruins and understood. Rome, as he'd known it, was dead. The question was, could it be reborn? 390 BC, July 18th, the Battle of Allia. 20 minutes of combat. 15,000 Romans destroyed. 11 miles from home. 7 months of occupation. 1,000 pounds of gold paid. Pride shattered. But here's what the Gauls didn't understand. They'd made a mistake. A catastrophic, civilization-ending mistake. They'd let Rome survive. Within 10 years, Rome had rebuilt. New walls, stronger walls, 12 feet thick, 24 feet high, encircling the entire city. Within 20 years, Rome had reformed its military, abandoned the phalanx, adopted the manipular system, created the legions that would conquer the known world. Within 50 years, Rome had conquered the Senones, Brennus's tribe, erased from history, their lands taken, their warriors sold as slaves. Within 400 years, Julius Caesar would conquer all of Gaul, not to expand Rome's borders, to exorcise the ghost of Brennus. The Romans never forgot Alia, never forgot the humiliation, never forgot Vae Victis. They made it their mission to ensure they would never be the vanquished again. The Gauls taught Rome a lesson that day about weakness, about vulnerability, about what happens when you're not strong enough to protect yourself. Rome learned it well, too well. For the next 800 years, Rome would not fall to a foreign enemy. Not once, not until 410 AD, when the Visigoths breached the walls. 800 years of invincibility, built on the ashes of humiliation. Marcus Valerius lived another 40 years. He fought in the wars against the Senones, saw them destroyed, saw Rome's revenge, but he never forgot the man he drowned, the Roman he'd killed to survive, the man whose name he never knew. In 350 BC, Marcus was 58 years old. He sat with his grandchildren and told them stories of Rome's glory, of victories, of conquest. He never told them about Alia, never mentioned the Tiber, never spoke of the drowning. Some horrors are too deep for words. But before he died, he whispered something to his eldest grandson, a warning, a lesson learned in blood and shame. Rome must never be weak again, whatever it costs. Whatever we must do, we must never be weak again. His grandson's name was Gaius Julius. His great-great-great-grandson would be named Julius Caesar, and Caesar would make Gaul bleed for what their ancestors did at Alia. Brennus won the battle, won the war, took Rome's gold and went home a hero. But he'd created something worse than an enemy. He'd created a nation that would never forgive, never forget, never stop until every Gaul was either Roman or dead. Vae Victis, Brennus said. Woe to the vanquished. He didn't realize he was speaking about his own people. By 50 BC, 340 years after Alia, Gaul would cease to exist, absorbed, conquered, Romanized. The vanquished became the victors. And the victors? They learned that mercy is weakness. That's Rome's legacy from Alia. That's the lesson Brennus taught them. Be strong or be destroyed. Never give an enemy a second chance. Never let humiliation stand unavenged. The Battle of Allia lasted 20 minutes. Rome's revenge lasted 340 years. That's the brutal truth. Sometimes the defeated don't stay defeated. Sometimes they remember, they rebuild, they return. And when they do, Vae Victis cuts both ways. Brennus destroyed Rome in 390 BC. Rome destroyed Gaul in 50 BC. The nightmare ended. But what woke up from that nightmare was something far worse than what went to sleep. A Rome that would never sleep safely again. A Rome that would never trust. A Rome that would conquer everything and everyone to ensure Alia could never happen again. The Gauls taught Rome to be ruthless. Congratulations, Brennus. You created the Roman Empire.